Today, we're going deep into the world of samurai, but not the Hollywood version. No flashy swordplay, no flawless warriors meditating under cherry blossoms. We're peeling back the armor to reveal the dark side of the samurai honor code. Bushido. This isn't just a story about feudal Japan. This is about what happens when loyalty turns into obsession, when discipline becomes control, and when honor demands sacrifice, even if it costs you your life, your morals, or your soul. So sit back, focus in, and let's explore the brutal world behind the mask of the samurai. When we picture samurai, we often imagine elegant warriors in silk and steel, standing still as stone, bound by unshakable honor. But that image is carefully constructed. Movies, anime, and pop culture made the samurai legendary, but in reality, the Bushido code was never as clean as it seemed. The term Bushido didn't even appear in written form until centuries into the samurai era, and it wasn't a strict, unified philosophy. Different clans had different interpretations. Some believed in mercy, others thrived on fear. At its core, Bushido wasn't about justice. It was about loyalty, not to the people, not to a cause, but to one man, your daimyo or feudal lord. Your master could command anything, and you were expected to obey without hesitation, even if it meant slaughtering civilians or betraying your own allies. In fact, killing yourself on command was seen as the highest act of obedience. This so-called honor was not the same as moral righteousness. It was about preserving face, maintaining hierarchy, and showing you belonged to the system, no matter how cruel it was. Nothing symbolizes samurai honor more than seppuku, the brutal ritual suicide where one slices open their own stomach with a short blade, known as a tanto. Most people know this act as a noble end, but behind the myth is something far more horrifying. The idea was to die with dignity rather than face dishonor or capture. But in practice, it became a tool of political control. Feudal lords would order their retainers to commit seppuku for failures, even minor ones. If a samurai hesitated, dishonor. If he begged for mercy, disgrace. Often, samurai were forced into seppuku to avoid execution by other means. It gave them the illusion of dying honorably, while maintaining the reputation of their clan. In many cases, children as young as 12 or 13 were forced to commit this ritual. The process was agonizing. After cutting their abdomen open, another samurai, called a kaishakunin, would be tasked with beheading them to end their suffering. But the pain before that, real, horrific, slow. Some samurai tried to rebel against this system. Others begged for forgiveness. But in a world ruled by Bushido, refusal meant shame not only for yourself, but for your entire family. So many went willingly, because there was no real choice. Let's move beyond duels and battlefields. Samurai weren't just warriors, they were enforcers of power. Many worked as tax collectors, bodyguards, and judges. Their authority was absolute over peasants and townsfolk. And while some upheld the law with fairness, others abused it mercilessly. During the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period, samurai often acted more like mercenaries than noble defenders. Raids on villages, executions of suspected traitors, and public mutilations were common. Heads of enemies were collected, cleaned, and presented as trophies. The more heads, the more honor. One historical record from the 16th century tells of a samurai who killed a farmer for walking too slowly past him on a rainy day. No punishment was given. Why? The samurai claimed he was insulted by the man's presence. Under the code, that was enough. This wasn't honor. This was terror management disguised as discipline. Samurai stories rarely include women, and that's not by accident. The Bushido code wasn't written for them, and in many cases it destroyed them. Samurai women were expected to be obedient, loyal, and silent. Their main roles? Bear children, manage the household, and die when told. If their husband committed seppuku, a samurai wife was often expected to do the same or face social exile. One notorious example, in the 14th century, during the fall of a castle, dozens of samurai wives threw themselves and their children into a well. Why? Because surrender would bring shame to their name. And let's not ignore the darker truths. When samurai conquered new territories, concubines were often taken by force. Some lords kept dozens of women, many kidnapped from peasant families, and called them gifts of loyalty. There was no honor in their suffering. And yet, their stories were buried beneath poems and war chants. Bushido preached loyalty, courage, and justice. But in practice, it was full of double standards. A samurai could murder a peasant for insolence, but if a peasant defended himself, it was rebellion. A samurai could switch sides in war and still claim loyalty as long as he served his new master with zeal. Perhaps the clearest example is Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a brilliant general who rose from peasant origins. He preached virtue yet led a brutal invasion of Korea where thousands were killed. Samurai under his command took body parts, ears, and noses as proof of kill count. These weren't rogue actions. They were part of the system. And the code? It bent to fit the victor's version of honor. Imagine being 5 years old and learning that your greatest goal in life was to die for your lord. That was the reality for many samurai children. From an early age, boys were taught that personal feelings didn't matter. Emotions were weaknesses. Anger, fear, grief, all had to be buried under obedience. They memorized death poems, practiced with real blades, watched executions. Some were taken into battle as early as age 13. And if they showed fear, they were punished, sometimes harshly. It wasn't just training, it was programming. Their innocence was turned into loyalty, and their minds forged into tools of the hierarchy. In samurai society, class was law. Peasants could not question authority. Artisans had to defer. Merchants, even if rich, were considered lower than samurai by birth. If a samurai felt disrespected by a commoner, he had the right to draw his sword and kill. No trial, no question. This was known as kirisut gomen, literally permission to cut and leave. You could be killed for bumping into a samurai or looking him in the eyes too long. And if your family complained, they risked death too. Bushido didn't protect the people. It protected the privileged. By the 17th century, Japan entered the Edo period, a time of peace. But peace created a problem. The samurai had no one to fight. No battles. No wars. And so, many fell into corruption. Some became tax extortionists. Others spent their time in brothels, gambling houses, or dueling for sport. The once proud warrior class began to rot from within. Still, the illusion of honor remained. Elaborate rituals, elaborate uniforms. But behind the kimono, a decaying code being propped up by nostalgia and pride. The fall of the samurai wasn't just about swords and guns. It was about the death of belief. When the samurai class was abolished in the late 1800s, the government needed a new national identity. So it repackaged the samurai as noble heroes, symbols of Japanese spirit. Films, novels, and propaganda turned warlords into saints. The violence was erased, the flaws forgotten. Even in the 20th century, during World War II, Bushido was used to justify kamikaze suicide missions. Pilots were told they were samurai, dying for honor. But that's the danger of romanticized history. We forget the victims. We forget the cost. The samurai weren't just warriors. They were men shaped by power, pressure, and propaganda. The Bushido code, while inspiring in parts, was also a tool of control. And behind every graceful bow and polished blade was a system that demanded blood. Honor, loyalty, discipline. These are powerful values. But when they're used to silence, to shame, or to kill, they lose their meaning. Thanks for watching Gentleman Mindset. If this opened your mind, subscribe and stay with us as we uncover more truths buried in history. Because true strength comes not from blind loyalty, but from questioning what we're told to believe. Until next time, stay sharp and stay curious.